Hey everyone, I'm going to
Hello.
pop over here now so we can actually see what's going on. This is our first live in a really long time, and Magali is back here with me. The reason I've got this down here is I want to make sure I can see all of your chats and what you're asking as it pops up. As always, if there's any problem with sound or with the video not being quite right, just pop it up there and I will see it. Although there is a delay, so it'll usually take 30 seconds to a minute before I actually realize what's going on, just in case you think that I'm ignoring you. Did you have a good summer, Magali?
I did. Oh yeah, we had a lovely summer in Ireland. I think. Yeah. Until yesterday. I think. I feel like yesterday was raining continuously throughout the day, and we're like, that is it. It is now over, because we had a bit of an Indian summer for a few days. It was lovely. It was like 20 degrees, which is a lot.
And a bit strange. It was a little disconcerting because of the fact that we'd had such a cool summer and we just kind of had resigned ourselves to the fact that there's going to be no warm weather. And then we had this week where it was about 10 degrees warm. Well, not quite, but close to.
It's the back to school weather. I think the last live we had was around the leaving certs weather, which is when the children are taking their exams.
Yeah.
And the weather is always great at this time.
And then everyone's back. Yeah.
And everyone's back. And now it's back to school. Yeah. But yeah, no.
Now, you probably all know we're going to be talking about the Saoirse Sweater and vest today. So I have a few questions that came in through KnitHub, but if there's any specific questions you want to ask about, now is the time to throw them up, because I am going to be popping in and out up here to make sure that I don't miss any. Oh, Kimberly's saying you're from Cape Coral in Florida, where you're in a hurricane watch. I've been watching it because my father-in-law is just out of Tampa, and I know that they've probably pretty much missed it, but a lot of it looks like it's going straight north. So my husband, he's well trained at growing up in Florida, and he's on pretty much constant hurricane watch, and by virtue of that I am also. So I am hyper aware of all of the hurricanes going on in Florida, just to let you know. So I hope you're all safe, and that anybody who is in the direct line of it has had enough time to move, and that all will be good. So we've got Kirsty has asked about tightening the neckline. She thinks if she can cast on 6 or fewer stitches at the back, she can add 6 rows to draw it in and keep the shoulders straight for those 6 rows. You could do that. The other option, if you didn't want to make any changes, is you could adjust the neckline afterwards, because that's actually why very often I like to do neck finishes at the very end. There's 2 reasons. One is because if you do a cast on and then you pick up stitches and do some form of a bind off, it gives it a little bit more stability. And normally when you're doing seamless, particularly top down, you need to think about where all of the pressure or where it's being pulled on the most. And for raglan, that's going to be the neck. Same with circular yoke. So if you give it a bit more stability, it can hold its shape. So for this particular one, what I did, I picked up stitches, and then it's a smaller needle you use for the garter stitch, and there's a few decreases at the back of the neck, but you could pick up slightly less stitches and do a wider garter stitch band with more decreases as well. So that's also another option. But if you do want to do less at the start and then do more increases going down, that will also work. But probably more straightforward one is doing the decreases afterwards on the neck. I am actually, this is a surprise for me too, because there was 3 different versions. We've got newer worsted, which was the full sweater with waist shaping and the crew neck. We've got the cumulus vest option, which has the straight body that I've done. And there was a 3rd option that we put on, but we haven't yet knit up, that Magali has been working on. And
It's just started the top, the yoke.
Blaster.
Yeah, with the blaster. I'm sorry.
It's beautiful in this color.
It's interesting because these 3 yarns are so different.
Yeah.
And they're giving such a different result on like the texture.
Yeah.
So like it's amazing that just one pattern can be used for like these 3 very, very different yarns, for sure.
And I know that you had a little bit, because your gauge is a little different from mine, so you made adjustments as you went along.
Yes. So what happened is like I had to change my needle size because my gauge was just one stitch too much for the smaller size and one stitch too little for the bigger side. So I did two swatches and I blocked both of them. And basically I decided to go on smaller needles, but then the blocking, I'll just be very careful at blocking to block it to dimensions and
a little bit more aggressive.
A little bit more, exactly. I like saying aggressive. But like I think I know that my math is correct, and I've kind of been very careful in like the trick that you kind of gave me a while back is like I do measure my swatch at different spots as well, just to make sure that it's everywhere. Like we're getting a consistent tension. But I think it's when you're there and when you kind of know that you need to block in a certain way, the process of it is a little bit more, I find it a little bit more stressful because I just trying it on as we go along is not the same thing because I know that blocking is going to have a big effect. So I think it's incredible the difference you can see. Like I know that I'm a bit of a tighter knitter than you are, but you can, I don't know if it's visible to people that the stripes definitely look slightly different on the three versions.
I will say for me, there, particularly the newer worsted, vertically it relaxed enormously. Like it had almost an accordion effect when I was knitting it.
Yes.
That it was like, so I mean, so do be aware of that when you're measuring your swatch. Don't take what's knit on the needles and go, oh, that's fine, without blocking, because it changes a lot, because those purl ribs, they kind of fold it up vertically. And then when it's relaxed, it stretches down. The biggest danger is actually on the sleeves, because I knew this and I was kind of opening it out a bit, but but it's still, they ended up with blocked a little longer than they probably would have been otherwise. And that was actually because of the fact that they did open up. So steam blocking, I know you said steam blocking didn't quite have the complete effect, but it gave you a pretty good idea if you were on the right track.
Yeah, so because I wanted to try it on basically to see if the armpits were giving me, like if the armpits were there. So I didn't find an incredible difference before and after steaming, but it did kind of relax the kind of stripes a little bit, and I got less of the accordion effect. But I still think, like, so I haven't modified it. I do find that the armpits are like on the smaller side, but I'm really on the fence about making it longer again, because we know that when we're going to block it, it's probably going to kind of be fine at blocking. I don't want to kind of panic, make it too long, because I find that, and like the blost is an interesting wool because it holds on its shape for a very long time. So it's you don't have the weight of the linen that we would have on the Nua to kind of make it like this. So I'm kind of really thinking about what the wool is like, how it's going to react and things like that. And I was just wondering if other people were thinking about that as well.
There was a question, someone was asking what needle size you were using, and it's one size smaller, isn't it?
Yeah, so 4 millimeters instead of 4.5 millimeters.
Which I think is a US size 6 probably. And I think, because I remember, because 7 is 4.5, so I think it would be a US 6.
Okay. So 0.5, I went down 0.5.
Camilla is getting distracted by all the yarn behind us.
It's so pretty.
Just in case you're wondering why we're downstairs, is this weekend Laura Nelcombe is bringing a tour group with knitting tours to our studio. And it's actually the first time I've done a class here. So the upstairs space has effectively been gutted, and there's a whole pile of stuff put in the back, which is our usual studio space, so that the rest of it can be used for a class. So we're down in the little cozy spot in the, I suppose it's in the yarn cocoon here.
Yeah, it's very comfy, not gonna lie.
Oh, great. Somebody was asking as well about your sweater. It's Dahlia. Yes, we don't have it very often because one of my children and their partners, I knit the Dahlia cardigan and the sweater for them. And they had them for the last year or two. And then I asked if we could borrow them so we could take some photographs. And while I was here,
and we just had the customer coming into the shop, and we're looking for something similar, and I just pulled it out and I was like, this actually feels very, very nice. I really like the shape of it.
I'm looking just at some of the other questions here, and Carol was saying, ironically, she normally is a loose knitter, but she went up a needle size with the Blasta. It's fascinating, and I do find that sometimes with Blasta, it depends on the type of needle you're using, because I find that if I'm using metal, it does knit tighter. Wooden, it tends to knit looser. So Blasta has quite an impact. And someone was asked, we've got Alexander, you asking if it could be knit in newer sport. I think that you're going to have to make quite a bit of adjustment to the gauge. Like, I'm not saying you can't do it, but you cannot knit it as written for sure, because the newest sport is going to be like, there's that usually knits to between 22, 24 stitches per inch comfortably. So that's, it's going to be quite a bit tighter than the newer, or smaller stitches than the newer worsted. So yeah, a good bit of adjustment. So let me talk a little bit about the actual sweaters and how they're put together. So anyone who's taking part in the knit along will already have you've gotten your pattern, which is clue 1, which is down at the bottom of the PDF. And you'll also have gotten all of the videos within Teachable where they've been uploaded in there. Now, what you'll see also is there's some tips and modifications and explanations for what I've done. And I want you to bear in mind that all of these parts between the 3 ones we've got are all interchangeable. So you can take a vest and do a waist shaping version. You can take the sweater and you can do straight down. You can interchange the cowl neck versus the crew neck. So you can take whichever part of these that you want. The only thing that you're going to have to decide early on is if you're going to do the sweater or the vest. So they're the big ones, first of all. And as I was saying, there was a question here from Brenda, and she was asked, she's knitting the vest and she wanted to know when she would knit the cowl. So I kind of touched on it earlier on, but I'll kind of mention it more specifically here. The cowl versus the crew neck is knit at the very end. So all we're doing at this point is it's just going to be the open part, and then you'll pick up stitches afterwards. And that's very deliberately done so that you can modify the neck shaping a little bit yourself afterwards. And you can also put a nice tight bind off or snug enough so that it's not going to stretch out of shape if you've got a crew neck like this. So that's afterwards, which I think is good, so that it lets the possibilities open for you. What kind of a neck shape are you going to be doing?
I think I'll be doing a cowl in the end. I think we talked about that, and
that'd be great.
And I think with the Blasta, it's really appropriate because it's just going to be like really warm.
It'll be lovely.
Really, like we're doing 3 seasons really.
I know, and with this
winter version.
This one I don't want to mess with the microphone. You kind of see it's like it's not. I think it was 5 inches deep was the neck of this, but we could even do something a little bit longer to see what it looks like. And I also wonder if you could possibly, because to get a bit more drape, maybe even going up a needle size, definitely.
Oh, because we want to get that kind of looser. Yeah. We don't want.
Yeah. So we could. So I mean, they're the kind of things you can change as you're going through. Or block it so that it stretches out a bit, because I think cowls are nice when they're floppy.
I think because I very easily wear cowls. I kind of actually a really a nice kind of. Oops, sorry, I've just hurt the microphone there. But yeah, I like it nice, but nice and snug. But I know that a lot of people wouldn't really have wool straight on their neck.
Yeah.
So they would like to have something maybe something underneath and then the cowl around it as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for that, I suppose the looser that you knit the cowl, as particularly at the start, I mean, it might drape down a bit, but it's still going to be a slightly higher one for sure. Yvonne, you were asking, after casting on the neck stitches and joining the round, you've quite a gap where the body meets the new stitches. Is there a way to minimize that gap before you go any further? It was at the next. Sorry. It was just to this point up here where you joined on. That can. Oh, I see. When you've got the cast on each side, that can sometimes happen. Did you have any problems with that? Or?
I'm not sure. I know. Which gap are we talking about?
When you cast on stitches.
Oh,
and
you
rejoin here.
And you rejoin it. So I'm never too worried at a neckline, because I know when I pick up the stitches, I'm good.
Yeah.
Picking up the stitches, I actually find that, because I used to pick up the stitches for the necklines at the most edge stitch I could,
which is unforgiving.
Which is not actually the best result. Even if you do it like really well, I think you want to kind of really take your time to make a really nice curve around it. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
It does help. I mean, for anyone who's reached that point or you've just gone past it, and if you want to tweak it a little, the kind of things you can do is sometimes when you're joining the second one, a bit like when you're joining in the round, do one more stitch and lift it over. Other times what I find is it's actually that it's a loose stitch. So if you actually just pull the extra slack out of it and kind of distribute it among a few stitches, that can help. Because it's usually that it's a loose stitch where you've joined across, and so that can help like on one side. And if it's at the very end where you're just joining the two together, then lifting it over, I think can probably help a little bit as well. But ultimately, if it's far enough up near the top where you can pick up stitches underneath it, it's probably not too critical. And outside that, see if you can tighten it up, because I find myself doing that all the time. It can very easily end up being a slightly looser stitch, because if I turn this around here, you probably can't see it, but there's a little lip, so the very edge where it is going to be the loosest is going to be completely hidden behind those picked up stitches, which
I can see.
There's a little bit.
I have a nosy.
If you pull this up, see the way there is just a little bit of a loose gap here, and the reason that doesn't matter is when you pick up stitches on this side
underneath
and on the other side, and like you can actually even pull them together, because I've done that before, where you can effectively ignore the place where there's a hole, and if you pick them up on each side, it'll pull it together, and it will completely hide the fact that there isn't any stitch. The only thing where you might need to tweak it is just if the stitches across on the knitting are loose, so it's underneath where you're joining, because then it's not going to be hidden by the picked up stitches, basically. Susan was asking if the body was to become an A-line with pockets on each side hidden the sides. Ooh, that could be really fun.
Pockets.
So that is completely and utterly possible. And there's actually, it kind of ties in with a few other questions I've had here. There's Angela put in a couple of questions. She was asking if she could do the vest with body shaping, and the short answer is yes. And if she could make a shorter length, and that's also yes. I will say the length of this was the same as this when it was being done, but the cumulus does grow more vertically, so it looks longer, but it did start the same length to begin with. But the nature of cumulus, it's got a little less cohesion, so it is going to get a little bit longer as it's being worn. So, but you can make, if you are a little concerned with that and you don't want it too long, particularly if you're doing it in cumulus, hang it vertically between you, but while you're actually knitting it, and kind of if you're steaming it, steam it when it's hanging, so that you get like a true vertical length to see what it's like. The waist shaping for this, there's shaping on each side of the ripple panel, and you can it's going to be you should be able to see it. It's very gentle on each side. And I will describe it in the next clue. I will tell you how you can go about doing that. The only difference being is when you're doing the yoke of the vest, you come down here and your start of round is, I might have this wrong now. Your start of round is over here.
It's here, so I've got mine in red, so start around
is up here. But because you did the whole side of the front, the start of the round is over here. Here for the other one. But outside that, everything else is going to be the same. So it just means that you're working, it's like kind of a slightly different part. But if you always know that this section and this section is going to be the shaping on the front, and they're both going to be the shaping on the back, it makes no difference which you're doing, the vest or the sweater, because the rest of it will all be the same. But do keep an eye on the length, because that is going to be, that'll play a few games on you. I'm sorry, but it does with cumulus, less so with the other ones. The other one we had questions about was up here. There is, when you join, there's one extra row. I think this one came, it was Holly was asking that. We kind of had a bit of a discussion online about it, but I thought it'd be helpful to talk about it here as well. So when you start off, first of all, you're just doing the raglan rows back and forth flat. Then you're starting to increases down along here. So the start of your row is over here, but then you need to join in the round. And when you join in the round, what that will mean is you're going to have one little section just of a few stitches across here that you will make a couple more stitches you'll knit a few more stitches across here. And the reason you want to do that is you want this entire section across here to be on the same row of the stitch pattern, because you don't want your start around here, because in the ripple pattern that's going to look really odd. So whichever, it doesn't matter if it's a knit row or a purl row, whichever fits in more neatly with the pattern, but whatever it is, you want to start your round over here so that this whole front section is in one row. I mean, did that make sense to you when you were working it?
Yeah. Like I was wondering, I was like, ooh, because I have an extra knit row.
Yeah. And honestly, hold it up there.
I had to look for it. Like I had to look for it.
Across here.
There's this section here has an extra knit row, and it's really not showing. And it's I don't think it shows here. Yeah. It's ever so slightly.
Yeah.
Because so we don't want. We would have a line here if our start of row kind of started here.
That one few stitches with an extra knit in it is far preferable to a beginning of round over here. Whereas this is a lovely, easy place to have beginning of round, because you've got a slip stitch. It hides it really neatly. You also get rid of, normally when you're working in the round, like with the sleeves, you'll encounter this. You'll have the jump between the ripple, whereas when you've got these panels with the slip stitches, there is no jump.
That's so handy.
It's really nice.
I really love what the slip stitch is doing to this. We just have this beautiful, like almost like a braid, I really like I think it's really neat. So simple. Very sleek in a way. Yeah, I really like it.
Yeah.
And it's nice in your knitting as well, because you can see where you are at all times as well, which is kind of.
And there was somebody popped up something on Knit Hub talking about they were a little bit worried about tracking garter stitch and ripple stitch. And then as I was talking through the video and showing how I tracked it, it started making sense, and it made it a bit easier for them to read their knitting. Because did you find that once you get past the first couple of ones here, that it was a little bit more straightforward to read the knitting?
Yes, like it's always the same thing, when you just need to get used to it. But then once it's so clear and visible on the knit at this stage, that now I know exactly where in my head where I am at the garter stitch, and I kind of use the garter stitch as a kind of a guide. Very much a guide, and then. Yeah, I think a few times in the ripple stitch, I was like, oh, am I at the right row and everything? And now I kind of have in my head that when I'm slipping the stitch, that means I'm on the knitting side of the garter stitch.
Yes.
And when I'm knitting the slip stitch, then I'm on the purl side of the garter stitch.
I actually found the ripple stitch almost like having a row counter for me. There was a load of stuff, because it's just like, oh, I know I've done another four rounds.
Yeah.
Really convenient. And actually, I suppose tied with this, the same kind of thing is going to happen if you're doing the vest, because with the vest, when you reach the point where you are going to bind off your stitches, you'll have been knitting round and round, you'll be over here, but you are again going to have a start of round here, but you actually want the end of round to be over there. So there's going to be one section of garter where you're going to purl one more row. And I did it both ways. I did one where I did 2 knit rows, and I did ones because either way you had to have 2 together in order to bring the end of the row over here for the front. And so I did it both ways, and the extra purl row was a lot more forgiving. I found the knit looked more obvious, and so I undid it, and you can see there's one row there where there's 2 rows of purl.
I would have thought the opposite.
I know, and I did it both ways. I mean, you're welcome to experiment with it, like whichever you think looks less obvious. But basically, when you're going across here, this is the beginning of the round, and in order to reach the end here so that you can work this section back and forth in rows, you've got one little section of that garter that's going to be worked a second time in one stitch pattern or the other. Which one you use is up to you. I'd encourage you to just experiment and see which one you prefer.
I think it kind of takes us back to, when you're knitting in the flat, if you're knitting from bottom to top in the flat and you start building the neckline, then when you switch around to build the other part, there's always one row that is different.
Yeah.
And exactly. To me, this is, we're still, that's knitting for you.
And it's very forgiving because it stretches a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a few interesting questions up here. Where is it? Someone was asking here about what about doing a slip stitch at the point in the round where you change the sleeves in the round? Absolutely. Yeah, that just put in one extra stitch so that you've got a central seam. that you could absolutely and totally do that. I think it's a great idea. Great idea.
Wait, we need to write this down.
No, I think that's a great idea so you don't have a seam line in the bottom. For sleeves, I tend not to worry about it because it's underneath and you rarely see it. But if it's something that keeps annoying you and you want a way to hide it, that's, I think, a very good way of doing it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I actually, as this part I love about knit-alongs is that I end up learning new things or getting new ideas, and I'm like, I never thought about that, but yeah, sure, go for it.
I'm just amazed by what people are coming up with to kind of just, have ownership of their knits really at this stage.
Camilla is saying she was a tester and she did 2 versions, both sweaters, and on the second one for her daughter, she made it without shaping. Also beautiful. That's great to hear. And actually, that was one of the most amazing thing with the testers is many people were already planning their second or their third versions. So I think this is something, it's a fast knit, it's enjoyable, and I think you'll end up getting a lot of use out of it.
Okay, it's very versatile pattern.
It is.
Amazing, yeah.
This vest I have worn, I'd say, half a dozen times already to different teaching events because I never want to be too hot, but I want to wear knitwear. And so I just keep putting it on. I'm like, I know I'm going to wear Saoirse. It's been really handy that way. Very handy.
Very tempted.
To make sure I didn't
for myself as well.
Is Magali an Irish name? No, it is not.
It is not. Not at all. It's a French name from the south of France.
You can probably hear it does not have an Irish accent.
No. It's but it's, I think the equivalent in English to Magali would be Margaret.
Could probably have guessed that, I'd say.
Yeah, it's just like it's a language from the south of France. The French word for daisy is Marguerite.
Yeah,
Margaret, and it's the same. It's all the same root. But I've lived here.
And sometimes when you came here, first of all, and when people were having difficulty with the name, you often short it to Mags. But you're like Magali, I think, is a lovely name.
I'm trying to claim my name back, because I started using Mags when I lived in Scotland shortly, and it was easier for people, and then I wouldn't be staying, and then I kind of got used to say hi, I'm Mags, and now I'm going to be here in Cork.
You'll answer to both.
And now I'm trying to claim my French name back. I think my friends were like, we want to call you with your real name, so I'm trying to. But Mags is somewhat easier in some situations. So
yes, I think Magali it's got more elegance to it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll tell my parents that you said that.
Just everything in French sounds more elegant, you just can't help it. Where are we here? Helpful and mindful tips on the sweater in the mannequin. You see the child sweater, the patterns for children's to purchase, not to be distracting. Yes, I'll pull this
really
one up
cute.
here. This one is Citrus Dreams, and it is the baby version of Citrus Dreams, and it's in the Life in the Long Grass singles, and I kind of adore this sweater.
It's so pretty. It's very pretty.
It's got that little dinky quality that you're like, ooh, who can I put this on? So yes, and we've also even got there's little tiny heart buttons to go with it. So yes, if you've got someone small and with single skein, it does the first few sizes. It's a good option. So not to distract from what we're talking about. I'm looking through here. And I think I've posted up the collection with all the child's patterns up here. I know there was a couple more questions that I want to pop into. One of them was from Angela, and she said she was knitting it with 3 strands of lace in mohair. Very brave, Angela. But there were some different dye lots, so she was alternating. And she wanted to know how best to alternate. She's doing the vest version, which means that there's going to be some sections flat, then in the round, and then flat, and then in the round again. And whether normally she would use helical stripes, which is going to be fine for when you're in the round section. But for when you're flat, how to work it. So you could obviously, like you were suggesting, possibly not alternating until you got in the round. If you're doing it flat, like typically what I do, if I've got 2 different dye lots or hand dyes, I'll just do 2 rows in each so that I have 2 going at the same time. Works fine. It's going to look a little different because it'll be wider, but it won't be a huge big difference. And I'd actually say if you're doing 3 strands and they're different dye lots, mix up the colors too.
I was about to say, if you're doing 3 strands, you could kind of slowly but surely kind of mix and match them.
So you might not even
one
have
strand.
And actually for that, it might actually mean that you don't necessarily even have to ever be alternating 6 lots of strands, just just drop, like start one and then drop in another before you finish and come back to the other, kind of mix it up. Because with 3 gives you a lot more flexibility. So it didn't occur to me until I was saying it that was actually
3 strands. You're like, you kind of sneak one in there.
I think so. So work it in with those 3, and it would be, because if there's one even with the bigger difference, you're basically just going to be creating a slightly mild effect with it then, so you'd never see it. Looking through, there was a question at the very beginning. Cecilia was asking on, when we said you cast on with the larger gauge needles, and she was asking what that means. So the reason, normally I just say larger needles, and the reason I put in gauge is sometimes there's short needles, sometimes there's long needles, and just to make it a little clearer, with the gauge we meant the actual needle size. So in this case, for my one, it was 4.5 millimeter is the gauge. And then at the start, I'll begin with a shorter needle. And because I'm using interchangeable needles, I changed to a longer one as I went down so that I could just stretch it out. You might possibly, if you've only got one length needle, you might start with magic loop until it fills out for the full thing. Like with you, did you just change the length of the needles, the cords as you were working through
I'm trying to think. Do you know what? Because I often have, like, I have 4 sizes of cables, but I just never end up using the short one. I just go with I go with magic loop because my short cable makes it, you have to knit at a different angle. And I just don't want to be tight. I don't want to kind of stretch the stitches. So I'll go with magic loop to make sure that no one's getting stretched out.
There was something that I thought that was just a cheat magic loop, but I've since discovered that there's a real name for it, the traveling loop. Have you heard of the traveling loop?
No.
It's something that you probably do already accidentally and didn't know there was a real name. It's if you've got a cord that is a little bit too long for what you're doing, but not long enough for magic loop.
You're pulling just one side, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And then when you get it, but it's been given a name called traveling loop. So I'm like, that's great. I know what it is. But it's often what you might do accidentally, where you kind of fall into that spot in between the two where you just don't have quite enough to do a full magic loop, but the cord isn't long enough to fill all the stitches. So
like you pull and you keep
exactly. And then when you reach another point, you just stretch it out. And it just gives you a little bit more capacity, I suppose, with it. Can I ask as well, when you were steam blocking it, did you pin it out or did you just steam it on the needles?
No, I pinned it out afterwards.
Okay.
I pinned it out afterwards. I had my tape measure on it as well to kind of make sure that I was kind of getting there, because there's the measurement. Sorry, I'm looking at the pattern which I printed. It was so helpful to have it printed. I kind of wanted to kind of, I use this as a kind of a marker, as a
guide.
A guide. Thank you.
And actually, I was going to turn it around here. So the top of this here down to the bottom, because that's where you cast on. So when you've got, like, on the actual schematic, if you want to check for your size, the length of the yoke, this would be where would be the one place where it's going to be the easiest to measure. So you can kind of see here. So this is going to be the top part. So for the smallest size is 8.5, and then it's 9.5. So you can check from that. And so that is a slightly deeper yoke than usual, because I wanted this to be a little bit more generous, a slightly looser fit. So like, if you're going, that seems really deep, it was intentionally so, because I did want it to have basically a slightly more relaxed fit. And often I find that slightly deeper yoke, slightly bigger upper arm, so that there's nothing too fitted. And then when you've got a little bit of shaping in the waist, it means it doesn't get oversized on you. But do keep an eye, unlike me, when you're doing the sleeve length and not going too long because of the blocking thing growing with it. So it's like it fits fine, but it's just, if you pull it all the way out, it's just a tad too long. And that was definitely by virtue of the stitch pattern, because it was perfect when I was working on it. I just didn't steam block because I was probably in too much of a rush at that point.
And also, I think, do you find there's a big difference between steam blocking and wet blocking?
I think that steam blocking gives you, it doesn't seem to hold as fast, I think, with steam blocking. It, like when you stretch it out, it'll give me kind of a fairly good idea, but I think it bounces back more quickly with steam blocking, whereas wet blocking kind of holds the shape for longer. So like it's probably more so on Blosta, because I think Blosta needs the wet blocking but whereas this one, it seems to, because it's worsted spun and the yak in it is also got a silky quality, so it doesn't take much to allow it to stretch out, whereas I think Blosta needs the wet blocking and needs the pinning to hold the shape where it was.
That's why I really want to trust the math on the swatch before I start changing anything, because and I think we were talking about this with the Jas as well, or the yarn. It's saying you just need
grows a lot.
This one, it's dramatic. But you really need to stick to the math of the gauge and just make sure that the gauge was blocked. And
it is a good idea, if you're like, when you've done your gauge swatch, to measure the swatch before you block it. And that, like, I know we don't always do it, but like that way, if you measure it before and you measure afterwards, you get an idea of how much growth you get. And that will be quite reassuring when you're making it. If it looks like it's a little small, you can steam it to check, and then you can also just double check what the size was. And the one thing that was suggested to me is laying the swatch down and drawing around it before you block it, and then blocking, and you can, like, it's easier because you've got kind of a record of the size it was. I think that could be quite helpful. So it gives you, you can even give a percentage of it grows 10% in length or 20%, you know.
That's a good idea, because I have I just have mine. I have both swatches there.
This is the blocked one.
They're both there, so they're both blocked, but and one of them is
see how much it's relaxed vertically, is it? Yeah.
So I think, because I really, my gauge, like, one of them was just one stitch over and the other one was one stitch under. And I was like, what am I going to do?
And in those cases, like for me, if you are for a knitter, if you're doing it for yourself, you can decide which fabric you prefer. Do you prefer the slightly looser fabric, or do you prefer the firmer fabric? And then you can tweak it as you go along. Because if it's a little looser but a little bigger, you might size down. If it's a little firmer but you like the firm fabric and you want it perhaps a little warmer, then you might size up. So, you know, you can, or if you were between sizes, it might also help you decide. But I would go with the actual fabric for people knitting for themselves. It's Magali's in more of a bind because of the fact that she's kind of knitting it for us. So
it's so, because like, this one does look a lot tighter. Like if we look, but I don't know how much one can see because this is a darker color, but you can see that the ripple is just a lot tighter on mine than it is on the worst Nua. On the Nua, And this was just simply too big. I will.
A quick look through to make sure I haven't. Susan was saying she couldn't get 18, got 17 in your number and 34 rows to the 4-inch. Yep, I mean, that should be fine. Just keep an eye on it and make adjustments as you're going through. Make sure that you're liking the size that you're getting, keeping in mind any changes that might happen after blocking. And Lynette started with a 24-inch circular for the flat rows, and by the time she joined, she was able to keep using it. 16-inch circulars are hard in your hands. I know what you mean, because it's a different, that's exactly what you're saying, is that you have to hold them differently on the very short one. 20 inches is about as small as I like knitting with. I don't mind that one.
So the shorter one in centimeters, like
that would be 40.
That's 40 centimeters.
That's very short.
And so you have to knit at an angle. And I just don't find it comfortable, because I don't actually, because I feel like it changes my tension or something. So I've got it, and I've used it a couple of times until I put it away.
Audrey was saying she liked the increases in the yoke, because she's able to make the regular size without any alterations. Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. So Sarah, do we go up a size? We haven't for the moment. We're going to block it to size by the time we reach the end, because it's still a little smaller, but when it was blocked, it blocked to the larger size. So we haven't changed the size for this. We're going with this one. Over the Susan was saying over the large swatch you moved from 4.5 to 5, then 5.5. You were surprised and wondering if the worsted spun nature of the yarn affected the stitch size. It may, or it may have been like the knitting the knitting needle type that you're working with can also have a bit of an impact. I think I've probably gone through most of the questions here. If there's any more, do pop up. Jump into Knit Hub, and we're always in to chat, either me or Emer, or maybe, I'm not sure if you're in Knit Hub, probably not. No,
not yet.
Not yet. We'll jump in and answer, or if you're listening to this afterwards, you can pop the questions up here. But thank you so much for joining us. We had an absolute whale of a time answering your questions.
Yes, we absolutely did, next to the wool. It was great.
We'll be here. It sounds different in here because it's kind of got a more cocooned sound to it. 2 weeks time, we're going to be discussing Clue 2. If you're not finished Clue 1 by then, don't worry. Or if you've got questions still on Clue 1, come in. We'll answer all questions. But yeah, enjoy your knitting over the next few weeks.
Bye.